The Battle of Verdun, fought from February 21st to December 18, 1916, stands as one of the longest and most grueling engagements of World War I. This monumental clash took place on the Western Front, in northeastern France, near the fortress town of Verdun on the Meuse River. The battle, involving French and German forces, was a bitter struggle that resulted in catastrophic loss of life and set the tone for much of the war's unrelenting attrition warfare. Its significance in shaping the course of World War I, and the psychology of both nations, was immense. To fully appreciate Verdun, one must delve into its causes, the strategic aims of the belligerents, the harrowing experiences of the soldiers, and its broader historical ramifications. Verdun had been a strategic military fortress since Roman times and was key to France's defense system, both symbolically and strategically. Verdun was surrounded by a network of fortifications, including a ring of powerful forts, which formed part of a line of defenses along the French-German border. The region around Verdun had been a flashpoint for Franco-German rivalry since the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871, in which France lost the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine to the newly unified German Empire. The loss of these territories, particularly Lorraine, just north of Verdun, had left a deep scar in French national consciousness. For the French, Verdun was more than just a town. It was a symbol of national resilience and pride. The German High Command, led by General Erich von Falkenhayn, understood this symbolic significance and saw an opportunity to exploit it. The German strategy at Verdun was not aimed at capturing large swaths of land, but at inflicting such devastating losses on the French army that France would be bled dry of its manpower and forced to seek peace. Falkenhayn famously stated that his goal was to bleed France white. The Battle of Verdun pitted the French army, under the command of General Philippe Pétain, against the German forces led by the German Crown Prince Wilhelm and Falkenhayn. Both sides entered the battle with substantial but very different strategic goals. For Germany, Verdun was meant to be a decisive blow, a battle of attrition that would force the French to commit vast resources and sustain unsustainable losses. France's objective, on the other hand, was purely defensive, to hold the line at all costs and prevent the Germans from taking Verdun, which would not only have been a military catastrophe but a moral one as well. The Germans assembled a formidable force of over 1,200 artillery pieces, including the massive Big Bertha guns, which could fire shells weighing over a ton. These guns were positioned in such numbers that Verdun was under almost continuous bombardment for months. Falkenhayn believed that the French could not afford to lose Verdun without a massive blow to their morale, and that they would continue to pour troops into the defense, regardless of the cost. On the French side, General Pétain took command of the defense and implemented a methodical strategy. Pétain understood the need to rotate fresh troops through Verdun to avoid the complete exhaustion of his forces. He organized a steady supply line known as the Voie Sacrée, Sacred Way, a road that became the lifeline of the French defense, constantly ferrying men, ammunition, and supplies to the front. The battle began on February 21, 1916, with a massive German artillery barrage, one of the largest in history at that time. For 9 hours, over 1 million shells were fired at French positions around Verdun, pulverizing the landscape and burying French troops alive in their trenches. Following the bombardment, German infantry began their advance. In the first few days, the Germans made significant progress, capturing several key positions and pushing the French back. Fort Douaumont, one of the key forts in the ring around Verdun, fell to the Germans on February 25, giving them a significant foothold in the area. However, as the battle dragged on, the initial German gains were met with fierce French resistance. Pétain's strategy of rotating troops and maintaining supply lines began to pay off. French soldiers, enduring unimaginable hardships, held their ground. The Germans, who had hoped for a quick victory, found themselves bogged down in a slow, grinding battle. Verdun became a nightmare of trench warfare, with soldiers fighting for months in horrific conditions. The muddy, shell-blasted terrain, poisoned with gas and filled with the dead, became a symbol of the dehumanizing nature of the war. The battle became an ordeal of endurance for both sides, as neither could afford to retreat without significant political and military consequences. For the French, Verdun was a matter of national survival. The phrase, "Ils ne passeront pas," they shall not pass, became a rallying cry for the French troops defending Verdun. The French faced relentless artillery bombardments, gas attacks, and waves of German infantry. The fortress of Verdun, which had been intended as a safe fallback position, became instead a symbol of the broader struggle between life and death in the trenches. The German army, on the other hand, found that Falkenhayn's strategy of attrition was turning against them. The French, though suffering terrible casualties, refused to break, and the Germans themselves began to suffer massive losses in the relentless attacks. Verdun became a vortex, consuming men and materiel on a scale neither side had fully anticipated. The continuous need to rotate troops into the battle meant that by the end of the fighting, almost three-quarters of the French army had served at Verdun at some point, contributing to the deep emotional and psychological scars the battle left on the French people. By mid-1916, the Battle of Verdun had become a stalemate. In July, the British and French launched the Battle of the Somme, partly to relieve pressure on Verdun by forcing the Germans to divert troops. As the year dragged on, the French, under General Robert Nivelle, who replaced Pétain, began to retake some of the lost ground, including Fort Douaumont in October. By December, the Germans, having failed to achieve their objectives and suffering from exhaustion and supply problems, began to pull back. On December 18th, the battle officially ended, with the French regaining most of their lost positions. The battle had no clear strategic victor, but it was a significant psychological and political victory for France. The French had held Verdun, and the German plan to bleed France white had failed. However, the cost was staggering. Both sides suffered immense casualties. Estimates suggest that the French incurred around 377,000 casualties, while the Germans lost around 337,000 men. The battle became a symbol of the futility and horror of World War I's trench warfare. The Battle of Verdun is often considered the defining engagement of World War I on the Western Front. Its significance lies not just in the numbers of dead and wounded, but in what it represented: a shift toward total war, where entire nations were mobilized to endure a war of attrition. The sheer brutality and length of the battle underscored the hopelessness of World War I's stalemate and the lack of strategic breakthroughs on either side. Verdun also had profound psychological and cultural impacts. For France, the battle became a symbol of national resilience, and the soldiers who fought there were celebrated as heroes, even as the reality of their experiences was marked by trauma. The phrase, Verdun, itself entered the lexicon as a synonym for endurance in the face of overwhelming odds. In the broader scope of World War I, Verdun was pivotal in weakening both armies. The immense casualties contributed to the erosion of both French and German military strength, which, along with the battles at the Somme and Passchendaele, gradually wore down the German army until the final collapse in 1918. The Battle of Verdun, lasting nearly 10 months, encapsulated the tragedy and horror of World War I. It was a battle fought not for decisive strategic gain but to inflict as much suffering as possible on the enemy, emblematic of the attrition warfare that defined much of the Great War. Verdun remains a profound symbol of human endurance, sacrifice, and the devastating costs of war. Forever etched into the collective memory of both France and Germany,